Hello, everybody. Welcome. My name is Christina Tallens, and I'm the Director of Modern Slavery Risk Assessments at the Wilberforce Institute. I'm delighted to welcome you to today's webinar at the Wilberforce Business Academy. So in today's presentation, we're going to be looking at how we identify and support victims of modern slavery. This is a really important topic for us at the moment, given the reality of the current legislation, which has created a very hostile environment towards undocumented migrants. And this can be problematic because whether you're a patient that wants to speak to a GP or a victim reporting a crime or a potentially exploited worker that wants to report their employer to the authorities, the data can be checked by immigration officials and people could potentially face deportation. So it's clearly a risk for vulnerable workers who are in situations of labor exploitation or modern slavery. So today we are going to be having a presentation from Andrew Smith, who's the manager of the Action to Combat Modern Slavery Justice Hub. And he's also the coordinator of the Humber Modern Slavery Partnership, which is a post that's been funded by the Police and Crime Commissioner for Humberside. So over the next 20 to 30 minutes, he will be looking at how we identify potential victims and how we can access support to make sure that we are, as best as we can, protecting people's human rights. So first things first, I'd like to just point out that this presentation is being recorded, but we will stop the recording at the end of Andrew's presentation, and we can come to questions and discussions at the end, and that gives you an opportunity to feedback or to raise any queries. So during the presentation, you're all very welcome to send in your questions, and you can use the chat box at the bottom of your screens. And I think there'll be about 15 minutes at the end of the presentation to just go through these and perhaps have a group discussion. So given that we've got a few people here today, we may not be able to go through all of your questions, but if you need, we can come back to you via email or privately. So first, before passing on to Andrew, I just wanted to tell you a little bit about the Wilberforce Institute. Andrew, if you can share the slides. So yes, some of you may already know us, and for those of you that don't, the Wilberforce Institute was founded in 2006, and it's really composed by a team with an interdisciplinary focus. We have academics and practitioners, and I would say that both Andrew and I fall very much within the realm of practitioners, but we have staff from history, law, social sciences, and education. We've had, I think for the most of us, we've had direct experience of dealing with forced labor, debt bondage, trafficking, smuggling in supply chains. We've worked on these issues for a very long time. And in fact, our risk assessment services were set up back in 2014, just before the Modern Slavery Act came into force, because we recognized at the time that there was a need to support organizations and businesses in dealing with these issues, because they weren't simple, they weren't easy issues for companies or organizations to deal with. So we have established since 2022 a branch of the Wilberforce Institute that also helps businesses research and address the legacies of historical slavery. And we've had some really good, impactful work done with The Guardian by our colleague Cassie Gupta. So without further delay, I'm going to pass you over to Andrew. Andrew, it's all yours.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me all right? That's the first important question.
Yes, it's all good.
Excellent. Thank you. Well, thank you for having me along this afternoon, Christina, and it's nice to be able to do this. So as Christina said, I'm the manager of the Action to Combat Modern Slavery Justice Hub and the coordinator of the Humber Modern Slavery Partnership. So predominantly my work muted me.
Sorry. Yes, sorry.
It's okay. My work looks predominantly at trying to coordinate our anti-slavery response across Humberside. And as you can imagine, there's a whole host of stakeholders and partners involved in that from statutory and non-statutory organisations, obviously specifically local authorities, police forces, but also community groups, faith groups, the public, etc. And my other project looks at how we can use the legislation and the policy we do have to try and improve responses to modern slavery. So I hate to admit, I do have 15 years or more experience now of supporting vulnerable people, typically people with complex multiple needs within the homelessness sector, but also modern slavery, exploitation, trafficking. So I have been a first responder for the Salvation Army as well for a few years. So I've got some experience of referring people in for support and supporting them going forward. So hopefully if my slides will work, there we go. So really just to kind of cover off why we need to focus on identification and support, and why predominantly the work I do, a lot of that is around identification and support. So firstly, obviously, for businesses, certainly under the Modern Slavery Act, you need to conduct those checks on suppliers and address any issues that might be found. And really, that's a lot of that work is through Christina and through the Institute, is to make sure that those checks are carried out in a timely fashion. And of course, we probably all know this, victims are often fearful of authorities and unwilling to report these crimes themselves. As we've said, legislation is evolving, and certainly migrants in particular are facing a hostile environment, an increasingly hostile environment, and that has an impact on their ability, but also their willingness to actively seek support. I'm just going to make that's better. And then also to take action and navigate those local support networks, basically with a view through the lens of safeguarding people and their human rights. So in this 20 to 30 minute session, if there's anybody on the call that does know me, they know that I like to talk. So this is a real challenge for me this afternoon to be quick and concise. We're going to quickly look at how victims might present in different scenarios. We're going to look at how we might identify someone in an exploitative situation, what support is available, and then hopefully have a discussion at the end. So I've only got a few slides, and really I just wanted to kind of foreground what I wanted to speak about with the legislation and how practitioners, how statutory organisations really need to focus on looking at how we determine if somebody is a victim of modern slavery. And the way we do this is through the act, the means, and the purpose. And I use this slide in all my sessions, all my training, and teaching within the university to various different schools, because it's a very useful tool for professionals to kind of break down and understand what situation someone might be in, but also importantly, how we can support them. And that's key. So within the legislation, we've got two offences within the Modern Slavery Act 2015. We have slavery, servitude, forced or compulsory labour, and we have the offence of human trafficking. So firstly, slavery, servitude, forced or compulsory labour, our exploitation. So we want to look at the means, which is how it's done, and the purpose, why it's done. So how it's done, was it by threat, force, abduction, fraud, coercion, etc.? Was somebody threatened into a situation through an imbalance of power whereby they had no, whereby anybody, any other reasonable person in a similar situation would also find themselves in? Were they forced? Were they coerced through various tactics such as violence, such as fraud, to commit to be exploited? Sorry. So that's the purpose why it's done. There has to be some kind of exploitation there, whether it's child criminal or sexual exploitation, forced labour, sexual exploitation, etc. There has to be some kind of exploitation. Now, interestingly, for children, only the purpose needs to be present. Anyone under the age of 18 cannot give informed consent. So for us to make a determination of exploitation, of slavery, servitude, forced or compulsory labour, we're just concerned with the fact that it has happened, that some kind of exploitation has occurred. However, the means story, the how it's done, is actually really, really important for us as professionals, as businesses, to understand how that exploitation took place in the first place, but equally how we can keep that young person safe going forward. So once they've been removed from that situation and we put support in place, actually, what are the historical factors or the current factors that actually we might need to work on to ensure they don't fall back into exploitation or don't remain vulnerable to exploitation in the future. Similarly, with human trafficking, we have the act, the means, and the purpose. So the act, what is done? So again, were they recruited? Was it a job offer of a better life in a different country? Was it a young person that was recruited through TikTok or WhatsApp or Facebook, something like that? Were they transported? Were they transferred, etc.? How? Again, the means, how it was done, threat, force, abduction, fraud, that imbalance of power, etc. And again, for what purpose? So what type of exploitation? Again, for human trafficking, the means doesn't need to be present for us to make a determination of human trafficking. We're just concerned with the fact that they have been recruited, they have been transported, and they have been exploited, or they were about to be exploited. That recruitment and that transportation was for the purposes of exploitation, even if the exploitation hasn't occurred yet. But again, the means is our context, the how it's done is our context, and from a safeguarding point of view, and from a long-term support and reintegration point of view, that is equally as important. And so for me, it's always important we still gather that information, even if we don't necessarily need it to be able to make that determination within the legislation. Excuse me. So as I say, I really struggled to kind of drill down to what I wanted to talk about today, given we don't have a lot of time together. So I thought I'd use this diagram, which is based on some recent research by colleagues, something called circles of analysis. This theory looks specifically at children, but actually it's applicable to adults and children in equal measure, really. So please just excuse the child reference in the diagram. But essentially, exploitation, that act of exploitation, should be understood as not a single event crime with a linear causal pathway by which victims can be identified by a fixed list of indicators and risk factors. What we're saying is there's a pattern of behavior or events that emerge from relational dynamics between children and adults, between a potential victim, the motivated perpetrators, and the environment that they all share, as shown by the diagram. And it really is a pattern of events, and this is how we try to look at it, as a pattern of events and behaviours that emerge from and are maintained by those interactions between complex systems. So each element, each individual each individual element acts as part of that system. They can be described and defined separately, but they all come together to make that exploitative situation, and we call them the perpetrator system, the environment system, and the child system, or the victim system, if you want. And each has its own attribute. So this is very much linked to theories around contextual safeguarding. And the theory is, without one, the others can't really exist. Or without all three, exploitation is very unlikely to occur, because we need all three of those working in tandem. So contextually, our potential victim, our adult or child, we look at their situation, what is historically and currently happening in that person's life that would likely make them vulnerable to some kind of trafficking or exploitation. So is it an insecure immigration status? Is it that they are in a different country where they don't speak the native language? Is it that they live in poverty or destitution? Is it peer groups, all those types of things? And again, very much with our perpetrator, what is the system in the environment in which that perpetrator operates and lives as a human, as a person? What are their motivations? So we're going beyond good, just that linear kind of idea of good versus evil. But again, is it conflict? Is it poverty? Is it generational learned behavior? Is it involvement over a period of time with crime, that type of thing? Is it somebody that was a victim previously and has now become the perpetrator themselves, has become an exploiter? And similarly with our conducive environments, or our context, which is really, really important. What is the context of that environment? And we bring all these three together to give us that pattern of exploitation where these three parts interact. Oh, I'm losing my voice already. So when we talk about access to support, something I'm quite passionate about, purely for the fact its support can take so many forms. In the UK, yes, we have something called the National Referral Mechanism, and this is a framework for identifying and referring potential victims of modern slavery, and in ensuring they then receive the appropriate support. And what I will say is there are situations and there are anomalies where sometimes established methods of support aren't always necessarily the most appropriate method for supporting a particular person. And I'll go into that in a minute. We have the Home Office that acts as what's called the competent authority. They will make decisions on all British national referrals. So any British national that's identified or makes a disclosure as a victim, as a potential victim of modern slavery, will be referred by a partner or an organisation that is a first responder, designated as first responder organisations. And the Home Office has 5 days to decide whether they think there are reasonable grounds, if there's reasonable evidence to suggest that that person is a victim of trafficking or some form of exploitation. Interestingly, what we have currently, we also have the Immigration Enforcement Competent Authority, and that authority is for all non-British national referrals, and they will make decisions on those referrals. The support side of things is something called the Victim Care Contract that's held by the Salvation Army. The Victim Care Contract exists to support all adult victims to ensure they leave behind their exploitative situation and their trafficking experience and can move forward with life. Around the UK, there are 13, I think it is, 13 subcontractor organisations that work under the Salvation Army within this contract, who provide support to adults, things like accommodation, It could be safe house accommodation, medical treatment, financial assistance, legal representation, training, education, interpreters, all of these types of things to help people recover from their experiences, but importantly, find ways to move forward with their lives. First responder organisations, I've put a link on this slide where it says NRM, and that will take you to the guidance that includes all of the first responder organisations. So all police forces are first responders. All local authorities are first responders. The Salvation Army is a first responder. There are various other charities, parts of Immigration Border Force are first responders. The Gangmasters Labour Abuse Authority are first responders. These are organisations that are that can make these referrals. Interestingly, National Probation Service and health partners are not first responders. They cannot make referrals if they come across somebody they think is being exploited. So in Humberside, as an example, part of our partnership working is to ensure if an organisation that isn't a first responder comes across somebody they suspect is being exploited, one of our first responder partners can come in and do that referral with that adult or child to make sure that they get that support. For children, anyone under the age of 18, if we come across a child that discloses exploitation or trafficking, or we have a suspicion that they're being exploited, we still refer them into the NRM. We still make a national referral mechanism referral, but all children, anyone under the age of 18, are supported locally by the local authority as they have a statutory duty to children, of course. What this does mean is that oftentimes children are not referred when they should be, because there isn't always necessarily a clear structure of support in place for children like there is for adults. So children will not be moved out of area to safe house accommodation, for example. They'll be supported locally by the local authority, social care and partners. Around the country, there are 20 local authority areas that are part of a devolved pilot for them to be able to make NRM decisions locally rather than waiting for the Home Office to make that decision for that child. Within those areas, those local authorities are able to make decisions much quicker based on evidence and information that they hold locally much quicker about whether they believe that child has been exploited or not, but also what support needs to be put in place immediately following that referral and that decision as well. And it's worth saying for anyone under the age of 18 that actually, regardless of a referral and regardless of a decision, whether positive or negative, we still have a duty of care to that young person. So very much in Humberside, my approach to this is every young person should receive a referral. It does help with that certain things that they may be given a independent child trafficking guardian, which is another part of the victim care contract and government support. They're not in all areas. They're in many areas, but they're not in all areas. So we don't have one in Humberside, for example. It will support with their leave to remain and other immigration issues for young people as well. But the physical support, like I said, is provided locally. So our view, and certainly my view in Humberside, is regardless of whether the Home Office agree that a young person, either a British national young person or somebody that's been trafficked from overseas, regardless of whether the Home Office agree or not, we still have a duty, if our professionals and our practitioners believe that that young person has been exploited, to provide them support as such, if that makes sense. And that's really important to know. And I think there's probably a bit of hesitancy around the country sometimes around how we support young people. Certainly given if they do get a negative decision. So if we do refer them to the Home Office and say, you know, we think this young person's being exploited, and the Home Office say, look, there's not enough evidence to suggest that this young person's being exploited. We don't think they are a victim of trafficking or some type of exploitation. That it's almost like, well, case closed. That's the end of the journey. I really think again we need to be looking much deeper at that to ensure that that support we provide locally is up to standard and is fully relevant to their needs that we've identified, if that makes sense. I've got absolutely no concept of time. I'm very sorry. So those are kind of the three main slides I wanted to share with you very, very briefly. I've also put a couple of other slides on here for you, and we'll share these afterwards if we've not done so already. I know we've got a mixed audience, but one of the things I wanted to mention was the Modern Slavery and Exploitation Helpline. This is a very good resource for everybody, for professionals, for the public, for businesses. Also victims themselves can ring and get in touch with the Modern Slavery Helpline and get advice from trained advisors. The Modern Slavery Helpline will also forward details and information to local partners within that area and the police, etc. Businesses can call for information and advice and to report any concerns they have around instances of modern slavery within their businesses, within their supply chains and their operations. And members of the public can also make calls to the Modern Slavery Helpline, either to report or just get some reassurance and advice on any suspicious activity, any concerns around individuals, premises, locations, that kind of thing. And the Modern Slavery Helpline also have an online reporting form, and they also have a very, very, very good app. And something I always try to tell people to do in sessions is to, if you do nothing else off the back of this session, is to download the Modern Slavery Helpline app. You can make reports through the app. It also gives information and advice on different types of exploitation, the signs to spot that type of thing. So it's very, very useful for workforces and staff to be able to have that information on their mobile phones. I suppose for businesses more specifically, we also have the Gangmasters Labour Abuse Authority. And again, there's some contact details on there. Their website is quite comprehensive. They will look at the mistreatment of workers by labour providers. There's also operating without a licence, or businesses using unlicensed gangmasters, etc. And again, you can get in touch with them to make reports or to ask for more information with concerns and advice and stuff like that. And then the other thing I wanted to include in this session was some links to leaflets. I've picked, I think, 3 or 4, and I found on the internet very easily. There are more. These leaflets give information about the national referral mechanism, about support that's available to people if they are being exploited or we think they're being exploited and we want to refer them into the NRM. I have to say the West Midlands Anti-Slavery Network the second one down, is very, very good. It comes in multiple languages. I believe you can use it digitally as well as paper copy as well. And this is just a really good, handy piece of information that kind of outlines what modern slavery is, what the dangers are, what people should look out for, but also what support is available. And I think that's really key for me is that people have this information to hand. People are fully aware and fully informed of their rights. That's massively important, probably more so now than ever before. So they understand that there is support available. They can go to the local authority, they can go to the police, they can make reports, and they can ask for support and help. The last link on this slide is a government webpage, and it's Modern Slavery Resources for Industry. So again, it gives information for lots of different sectors,